Hello, everyone. Happy to be here. I know you've been on for quite a while at this point, so hopefully this presentation will switch things up with a bit of code and technicality with a story as well. We'll be looking at managing secrets at home with Vault and Boundary today. So let's see, as we know, password managers are just an application designed to store and manage credentials. The problem is that with the increasing number of passwords we have today, it's driving adaptation, and then we see things like major incidents every single year occurring, people losing data, and it puts us all at risk. So, interestingly enough, my parents are retiring. It's that time. As I come into my career, they're leaving theirs. And so the story begins with my dad explaining that he's on Windows 7 still in 2022 and doesn't know how to protect his data. He's got all of this retirement stuff that he's trying to do. And so we need to keep him safe. And so I suggest a password manager, and surely enough, we get hacked and some data gets taken. And so it really just pushed me to say, how can I secure not only my parents, but also myself and my employees from these data breaches? And yeah, so how do we circumvent it? How do we keep our personal data safe? So with that, I'll introduce myself. I'm Michael. I'm a co-founder and a senior consultant at Hanabyte. I do run the Atlanta Hub with Eric Evans. You can reach me at my email, Twitter, GitHub, and we'll have that a little bit later in the slideshow. So our solution to fix this problem is what we're coining as HashiPass, nothing official yet. And it's just going to be a simple password management system that would allow us to keep our data safe. We need a secure password manager at Hanabyte, not only for us, for me and Eric, but our employees as well. It's a solution that we want to be able to scale from a small startup like ourselves to larger organizations, which we hope to grow to. So we want to be able to use this from start to end. And secondly, or most importantly, we want it for at-home use. I want my parents to be able to retire safely, don't have to worry about their data, and I would also like my other family members to be able to use it as well. And so we have some, let's see, focal points. The first thing is it needs to be cheap. Most password managers are free, or we have something like a paid plan or enterprise plan that's only a couple of dollars a month for every user. So making this cheap is really a big point for us. We need it to be affordable because it's so affordable to use. Another one, we also want it to be simple, right? We want employees or interns to be able to come in and use this. We want our older family members to be able to use this, and just make sure that it's very simple and easy for everyone. And the next thing is, once again, we want it to be scalable. It needs to scale from my personal use, my dad's personal use, all the way to enterprise level as far as we grow. The next thing is we need it to be secure. We want to make sure everything's encrypted. We want to make sure our data is safe from start to end. And we want to avoid having breaches that are caused by someone else or that happen to someone else. So by keeping it internal, we think we can keep it quite secure. And then last but not least, something that came along is we would also like zero trust security. So as we go, we realized we really want to be able to verify, validate, and limit as much as possible. I'm using something like MFA and YubiKey, which we're already implementing. Okay, so our initial design, very simple. We wanted to make something with a one-click run. It's important for us that it's very quick and we can automate this, put it in a pipeline, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to throw up a few quick things, just a VPC, EKS, using a load balancer, Bastion, and again, just a one-click method. And so Vault would sit on an EKS cluster with the traffic being forwarded through the ALB was our initial idea. And then the secrets would be obtainable using the CLI and UI. Next is we would just have a Bastion host, and we were going to use that to SSH through for CLI access, or so we could port forward from our local host and access it through the UI. So this is what our initial design came out to be. Once again, quite a simple, just straightforward solution. Definitely something you would find at home or you can build out yourself. So if you see one subnet, public, private, your EKS cluster sits in your private. The internal is moving traffic to that from the Bastion. And then let's get into the code. So The VPC module is what we're going to use to create our networking. It's not going to be a lot of code here because of how simple this design is initially. Once again, you're just going to set up a CIDR with a quick subnets. I might have gone a little bit overboard. I had extra subnets, but as you can see, it's no big deal. Make sure you have your tags, like the internal ELB set to 1, and then a little bit lower, you can see your security group. Just setting that up as well in case you need it. This is just an example. So let's move forward. We're going to set up the provider for Kubernetes and Helm. This is really just for our authentication. This will be used throughout the modules below, and there's really not much to this. And then what we want to do next is we want to create the cluster within the private subnet. This is using the EKS module. Once again, it's just going to be one node. It's not a lot of fancy stuff. Throw some tags in. We're using the config map for authentication, and just some additional IAM role policies that we ended up needing to, if I remember correctly, it was to, blanking here. It was so that the node could create our load balancer, so we have to attach that. And then we're going to move forward. And then we use the Helm release for Vault to stand up the Vault server on our EKS cluster using Terraform. And once again, the one-click was kind of a big thing for me. And so I really focused on getting this all into Terraform. And then last but not least, we also have our Helm release for the ALB controller from AWS. And this essentially just allows the Vault, or this controller pretty much sets up an ingress for the ALB, creates your ALBs for you, and just manages everything. So let's see here. Continue on. Just a quick note, it's very important in the documentation for the AWS load balancers that you set up your roles and policy documents and attachment to make sure that your nodes do have access and that your workers can create the load balancers as needed. And then lastly, we're just setting up a Bastion quick EC2 instance. I want to note, always use your VPC security group IDs, not security group ID. It comes with a little bit of trouble. And yeah, very simple setup here. Nothing crazy. Once again, back to the final design where I'd be over here just using an SSH and or a forward proxy. And so then we get to Boundary and how this came to be. We realized that using the PIM key is not the best option, right? This isn't a zero trust solution. Plus, who's really going to be using SSH? Or how am I going to set this up? And I'm going to tell my dad to set up his EKS cluster and SSH in and port forward. So it didn't seem like the most efficient or simple solution. And so that led us to our next option here. We are going to throw Auth in front of Boundary. And this might look a little odd, right? Because Boundary sitting here is almost if it's a Bastion. And we'll get to that a little bit later. But this is our initial thought process and how we wanted to update it after we were unhappy with the Bastion host. Cool. Yeah, so what's wrong with this diagram? Once again, Boundary is acting as a Bastion. And so what we wanted to keep in mind with our authentication is that it needs to be cheap or free as possible. It needs to work with Boundary. It needs to integrate with YubiKey if possible. It can handle MFA like Duo. And I would like to be able to do a lot of the management in Terraform. And Auth fits a lot of these. It doesn't exactly fit all of them, but it is quite a robust solution that worked for us in the time. And let's see. And so a little bit more code here coming in. The cool part about Boundary is it can be set up in Terraform as well. There's a lot of examples in the documentation, and they will get you all the way from working through a dev environment into setting up an HA cluster. And it's extremely easy to implement. As you can see, we can configure users, scopes, roles, groups, backend servers, and everything else, all through Terraform. And then I want to point out here, as you can see, we do have an auth method as well, which leads us into using the OAuth Terraform module here for the Boundary authentication. And this does allow me to set up, I can set up my user in Auth and then come in, add this into Terraform, and this user will be able to authenticate directly into Boundary. Okay, and so in the previous diagrams, you most likely noticed we were missing a worker, which is something we quickly came to find out is that, yes, we, we need a controller and we also need the worker. And so this is what our diagram ended up looking like in our next iteration, where we wanted to send this all through to the internal ALB. And yeah, as you can see, the problem is it's starting to grow. The amount of infrastructure we need is continually getting larger throughout this process. And we'll discuss a little bit later. And so once again, we still are looking at Boundary as if it's a Bastion, right? It's still sitting on the edge. There's nothing in front of it. And so we thought, okay, maybe we can add another ALB, right? It's in the documentation. Let's see if we can throw this in front, have an ALB in front of the workers, and then another internal ALB in Vault. And then, but once again, we're still increasing the amount of infrastructure we need. We're having trouble getting the networking down and getting it to work. And so we decided to kind of move along with this. And we're now at a point where we kind of want to follow the well-worn path. You know, this diagram is extremely helpful, and it looks like the way we really want to go, where you have a Boundary client, you're throwing an application balancer in front of your controllers, and then it accesses your workers, which in turn give you the session with your backend application. So after testing the boundaries of Boundary and what we can get away with, we're trying to mess with the dev server, see like what we can do in the backend and things like that, and nothing really worked. So a scaled down version of what the recommended high availability environment is what we think fits our needs right now. We are still working on the EKS aspect of this, right? We'd like a custom web page in front of our Vault, so you're not just accessing Vault directly, make it a little bit more user-friendly, and don't have to worry about people coming in directly to Vault. Let's see, let's join it. And then my final thoughts, what are our pitfalls? The first big one is with Auth0, right? Authentication solutions can significantly increase costs. So with Auth0, the basic MFA plan quickly surpasses $100 a month, and this kind of defeats our whole purpose, right? The solution cost can scale quite rapidly, as you've seen. The infrastructure needed to build out. It's not exactly friendly for the use case of someone out. We're falling short of simple. Again, there's a lot of stuff in the back end, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of different applications and methods for friends and family to go through to authenticate. And so they're not going to be able to use this as easily as you want. And then last but not least, we're missing a lot of the bells and whistles, right? With some of your favorite password managers, you get autofill, you have all sorts, you can share different types of things like cards, folders, all sorts of stuff. We're not able to do that without implementing our own front-end application. And once again, this just adds to our costs. And so to hit on the points, we do think we can implement a scalable solution that is not only secure, it's zero trust, but we fall short in the cost area, no matter what we do. And so that leads me back to the reason for this whole thing. And it's what will my dad do? Right, and so what I'm setting up now is just the most simple and cost-effective solution: an open VPN server, the Vault instance, and a private subnet, and something you can just get into no problem. It's cheap and easy. This solution, however, comes with a trade-off. It's not secure. It's not zero trust. It's not really scalable for what we'd want in our enterprise. So, as you might have guessed, yes, we're going to go with two different solutions: one for us, one for the company, or one for personal, one for company. And yeah, and so as we go along, maybe we find another solution, and that's really it. Yeah. Let's see. So let's keep in touch. I am a senior consultant at Hanabyte. I am on LinkedIn, and you get my email, Twitter, GitHub, anywhere you want to contact me, talk about secrets management, see what we can come up with for managing secrets and creating a password manager. So yeah, and then that is everything for me. So thank you so much for your time today. I hope everyone has a great Hashi's talk, and it was great being here. Thank you, and goodbye.